Cotton. 豪華滅却
Heyo guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto the Melt. As a child, Naruto is taken in by Sarutobi to be his chosen successor to the mantle of Hokage. He develops a bloodline long thought lost to the world and learns along the way that, though he may be hated for his demon, his will of fire will burn brightly. And let's see what changes will come to the Naruto verse. Before we start, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to this channel for more what ifs, and check the description for the creator of this great fanfic. So let us start.
Chapter 9. The voice in my head. And here's chapter 9. Hope you guys enjoy this one. Readers, reviewers, thank you, right where I need to be. Chapter 9. Naruto lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, clutching his old, worn stuffed fox in one hand. His mother told him he was getting too big for it, but he found the thing comforting. Especially when he had a lot to think about. And right now, his mind was going a mile a minute. His party had been typical. He'd played a game with Shikamaru and had nearly had him, when the boy pulled that stupid pose out and proceeded to blow him away. He'd never been so frustrated in his life. He'd had it planned out in just 4 more moves and he'd have him. He was still trying to figure out how his lazy friend had pulled it off. He was beginning to suspect that Shikamaru was moving pieces when Naruto blinked. Choji had given him a booklet of free meals, one for each restaurant in Konoha. Naruto thanked his portly friend profusely. He'd been wanting to try that new dango shop in the southern sector. Shino's gifts were usually as strange as the boy himself, not that they weren't useful. This year he'd given Naruto a watch with a compass in it. It was nice, but Naruto stared at him quizzically. Shino's answer had set the rest laughing and left Naruto slightly ashamed. Perhaps now you'll find the time to visit your friends. Naruto. Sarutobi had looked just as ashamed as the blonde. Perhaps he did need to let the boy get out a little bit more. Guy had promised him that they would begin to incorporate weapons into their training. Naruto had told his sensei not to mention his knife specifically. He wanted that to be a surprise. Kiba had given him a black collar with spikes, raising many eyebrows. Naruto, not wanting to be rude, had put it on. It looked strange on the blonde and many of the adults snickered. When asked why he was given a collar, Kiba had grinned and leaned in to whisper in Naruto's ear. Because, it goes great with Hinata's gift later this year. When asked what that was, his grin threatened to split his face in twain. I got her a leash so she could lead you around. You know, since whenever you're around her, you act like her bitch. The adults didn't know why Naruto turned blood red and swung a fist at a laughing Kiba, but it was still hilarious nonetheless. He and Kiba could be so entertaining. Once things were settled back down, Hinata gave Naruto her gift, which he accepted with grace and a blood-red face. He opened it and was delighted by what he saw. It was a pair of black leather gloves, fingerless, with the leaf symbol on plates on the back. They'd work wonders with his taijutsu and weapons training. Hinata had just been concerned he would hurt himself. She didn't know how fast he healed. The rest of the party was normal. Konohamaru gave him a hug and his parents told him they'd give him his gift later. Sarutobi had told him he could learn a new jutsu later and everything was right with the world. He couldn't wait. His training with his field knife was coming along nicely. He'd become quite proficient at slitting the throat of his cage bunchins by coming up behind them when they got too close to the house or a tree. He'd found that if he was extra careful, he could sever the spine at the base of the neck and get rid of them easily. He was fast on his way to beginning his training as an assassin. The biggest surprise of the party, however, had been the homecoming of his uncle Asuma. The bear of a man had walked into the party unannounced and strode right up to Sarutobi. "I'm home, Pop. So I see. Do you want to be reinstated as a shinobi of the leaf?" Asuma took a drag on his cigarette and raised an eyebrow. "You took me off the books. You left Asuma, under your own power and with my begrudging blessing, to join the Guardians. I had to take you off the active duty roster." The younger bearded man nodded and ground his cigarette out on the ground. "Will I still have my ranking?" Sarutobi nodded and stood. "Yes, you'll be reinstated as a Chunin and can take the Junin exam at a later date. But for now, you've come home at a time of remembrance and joy." "Really? Yes. You should go say hello and, happy birthday, to your nephew." Asuma turned to look at the blonde and his eyes widened when he saw the whisker marks. Is that? Yes, it is. And he knows of the burden he carries. Asuma watched with wide eyes as the blonde approached him and looked up at him with curious eyes. You know, I didn't think you'd be so big, Uncle Asuma. Any tension was gone immediately. Well, I didn't think you'd be so short. Now there was tension. Asuma had proven to be a pretty laid-back guy and Naruto could tell he and his uncle would get along just fine. Asuma was also quite powerful and intelligent, though not as much as Yahiko. Asuma had taken the way of the warrior, Yahiko the way of the scholar. Both could hold their own in a fight, but Asuma was the more powerful of the two, and also the laziest. His uncle had decided to get an apartment of his own, rather than living in the compound since he and Sarutobi still differed on some things and avoiding a fight was paramount to the family. Naruto's eyes were finally growing heavy and he was just about to drift off to sleep when an ear-splitting scream from his mother made him bolt upright. Not knowing what was going on, he grabbed his knife and melted into the wall. Tauzenka Sora had been on the road to a leisurely life as a shinobi 10 years earlier. He was a chunin, soon to be junin, and life was great. He was engaged to a beautiful woman and their wedding date had been set for later the next year. Then the Kyuubi came and that all changed. Sora had watched as his fiancée was crushed under the thing's foot and all his hopes and dreams came crashing down. He had rushed at the beast in a rage, wanting to get just one good hit in before he died. But destiny had other things in store for him apparently. The Kyuubi had merely looked at the man when he drove a sword into its leg and had swiped hard, knocking him several hundred feet away. The fall had broken both his legs and he'd never walked right since. Once the thing was defeated, he had been a loud supporter of killing the child containing the beast. When his Hokage had said it would not be killed, he was devastated. His fiancée had lost her life for nothing. Sora fell into a depression after that. He lost himself to alcohol and had lost everything. His family tried to get him to move on, told him that his fiancée would not want him to be like this, but Sora clung to the past. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see that damnable fox, howling in victory as it crushed everything in sight. It was despicable. He couldn't take it anymore. A decade of loneliness and regret were slowly killing him. He was too much of a coward to follow his love into the afterlife. He couldn't kill himself. He wanted someone else to end it. But he wasn't a shinobi anymore and he couldn't take suicide missions. Therefore, as he drowned his sorrows in the bottom of a bottle, he came to a conclusion. He'd go and challenge the beast to a fight and hopefully, they'd kill each other and he'd be remembered as a hero. He could meet his love in heaven with his head held high. His family would be proud of him again. His comrades would see him as a ninja again. And all he had to do was face the fox with courage and dignity. But, the fox was crafty. He took another swig of the drink and slammed the bottle down. He'd need to bait it to get it to come fight him. It had proven to be quite sneaky in the past few years, saying it wasn't what it was, a demon. He'd show it how much of a demon it was. Sora told the bartender to put it on his tab and wobbled out. He wouldn't be back to pay the bill anyway after tonight. He needed his weapons and all of his cunning. Being drunk would help. It would limit his inhibitions. Seeing the innocent face that the fox had adopted in recent years would only deter him if he was sober. And hesitation would get him killed before he could take his revenge. He gathered up his weapons and headed shakily for the Sarutobi compound. He would need all his cunning. Since forces were still spread thin, there was no Anbu around the compound. After all, the Hokage could take care of himself. Sora climbed over the fence with great difficulty, his weakened legs not helped by the fact that he hadn't worked out in years. But being weakened also made him careful of where and how he stepped. He made his way to a window and slid it open. Eri was sleeping peacefully until she heard the window slide open. She didn't have time to do anything when she felt a hand clamp over her mouth and she was dragged out of bed and down the hall, kicking and punching. Sora snarled when she hit his shin and hit a pressure point on her neck that left her wide awake, still able to see what was going on. Sarutobi heard her muffled screams and made his way toward them slowly. He peeked around the corner of the doorway to the living room and grit his teeth when he saw Eri being held by an unfamiliar ninja. This was bad. He stepped from around the corner and drew to his full height, leveling the man with a glare. Sora drew up and pressed his kunai into Eri's throat with a little more force. "What do you want with my family?" Who are you? Sora snarled and drew a little blood from Eri's throat, the droplets rolling down the blade. Sarutobi watched with silent fury and tried to reassure the woman with his eyes. It didn't help when the rest of the household showed up and Konohamaru pushed his way to the front. Mama. Eri shook her head slightly, tears rolling down her face, trying to tell Konohamaru to stay away. Aoi grabbed the boy around the shoulders and held him close, even as he struggled. Sora sneered at the family and drew himself up closer to the wall, trying to make it so he had no blind spots. I don't care about the Sarutobus, I want the demon. Bring him here and let me fight him or I'll slit her throat. There is no longer a demon. It's gone, lies. That thing lives on still, in the guise of Aryandime. And you let it live. How dare you disrespect his memory? Young man, I suggest you let my daughter go. You're drunk and obviously distraught. Let her go and I'll let you off lightly. Never. You bring me the demon and let me take him in battle. I have to avenge my love. He killed her. Eri began to cry harder as she listened to her father-in-law and the man battled back and forth with words. He wanted Naruto, he wanted her baby. Naruto never killed anyone. How could they continue to think such things? This was the first time that anyone had tried to do anything physically though, and she was now sure it wouldn't be the last. Sora dragged the blade lightly across her throat, letting blood begin to trickle down. Eri closed her eyes and thought about how she'd never hold Yahiko again. Or hug her two sons. Or scold them or get to see them grow or mess with their future girlfriends. Her eyes shot open when she heard a bestial growl from above and felt blood that wasn't hers spray the back of her head. Naruto moved through the walls with great speed, looking frantically for the cause of the scream. He finally saw his family assembled in the den and watched, hidden from view, as Sarutobi tried to reason with the deranged man. As he watched the first drop of blood trickle from his mother's throat, he grit his teeth. Your mother is in danger. Naruto shook his head, thinking he had imagined that voice in the back of his head. He didn't need any distractions now. He watched as more blood flowed from his mother's neck and his teeth punctured his lip. He'll kill her if you don't do something. Don't let her die in vain. This was all over him. Why in the hell couldn't they just leave him and his family alone? And the voice was becoming clearer and louder. If this was his conscience, why in the hell was it acting up now? His eyes sprang open wide when the man dragged the blade across her throat and the blood flowed freely now. If he had applied any pressure. What are you waiting for? Only you can save her. Naruto slid the knife from its scabbard and moved through the wall directly behind and above the man. He couldn't allow his mother to be killed. What would happen to Konohamaru? What would his family think if she was killed because of him? What would his mother think if she died for him? Don't let her die. Without another thought, he melted out of the wall and let out a spine-chilling growl as he placed the blade at the man's throat while grabbing his arm that contained the kunai. Sora looked up when he felt the cold steel against his neck and the uncommonly strong grip around his wrist. The last thing the man saw was the blue-slitted eyes and long fangs of the blonde, half hanging out of the wall, his mouth contorted into a sneer of righteous fury. Naruto pulled the blade to the side just like he'd practiced against his clones as he jerked the blade away from his mother's neck. Crimson flowed. Sarutobi looked in shock at the visage on Naruto's face. He looked resigned to what he'd done, as if there had been no other way. And there hadn't been. Sora, in his deranged state of mind, would have killed Eri if Naruto hadn't shown up. But now, the ability he had was known to the whole family and servants. This could prove troublesome. Yahiko was out on a mission and wouldn't be back until tomorrow or the day after. Eri needed consolation and had grabbed hold of Konohamaru and hadn't let go of him. The servants, knowing not to say a word, took the man's body away and began to clean up the room. Sarutobi crossed to Naruto, standing stock still in the middle of the room, his head down, hair shadowing his eyes, his hand gripping his field knife so hard his knuckles had turned white. Sarutobi knelt down in front of the boy and put a hand on his shoulder. Naruto. The boy flinched when he heard his name called and slowly raised his eyes to show the tears. I killed him, Gigi. Sarutobi pulled the boy into a hug. I know, Naruto, I know. But don't blame yourself. If you wouldn't have done it, he might have killed your mother. This is what being a shinobi is about. Weighing the death of your loved ones against the death of an enemy. But he was a leaf ninja, Gigi. I killed a comrade. A comrade doesn't attack unarmed civilians of the village he lives in and hold them hostage. You did the right thing, Naruto. The boy nodded and wiped the blood from his knife absently on his pajama bottoms before sliding it back into its scabbard. Sarutobi watched as the matte black blade disappeared from view. He blinked slowly and clapped his hands on Naruto's shoulders, forcing the boy to look at him. Let's go into the study, Naruto. I need to talk to you about this. I don't want you feeling guilty and retreating inward. But first, let's get you changed out of those clothes. Naruto nodded weakly and went off to his bedroom to change. Once done, he plodded to the study, his bloodline forgotten for the moment. You did the right thing, Naruto frowned when he heard the voice again. He had a sneaking suspicion who and what it was, but decided he'd ask his grandfather. As he opened the door, he found his grandfather sitting with his legs crossed in his favorite plushy chair, another one just like it drawn up opposite and 2 glasses of hot tea sitting on a side table. Sarutobi motioned to the chair and the tea. Sit and drink. Naruto nodded and took a sip of the tea. It calmed him somewhat when he felt the familiar warmth of the liquid slide down his throat. He needed something calming at the moment. Naruto, tell me how you feel right now. The boy looked up slowly and sat the glass of tea back down. Gigi, I feel vindicated. I feel like what I did was right. And that's what worries me. Should I feel like taking a life is right? In this case, yes. You saved your mother and there is nothing wrong with that. As long as you don't feel pleasure from every kill, you will still retain your humanity. Sarutobi watched the boy wince and asked what was wrong. Naruto's voice came across in a whisper. I think it's speaking to me. Sarutobi's eyes widened but he needed confirmation. What is Naruto? What's speaking to you, the Kyuubi? Oh gods, no. What did it tell you? To save mom. That no one else could but me. And afterward, before the voice faded, it told me that I did the right thing. Sarutobi sat back in his chair and took an extra long drag on his pipe. This could prove either advantageous or extremely bad. Did you speak to it? No. I said nothing. I didn't acknowledge it, although I think it knows I heard it. Sarutobi nodded and looked at Naruto. Tomorrow, he was taking the day off to take the boy shopping. If he was going to the academy, it was time to start letting him choose his own clothing. Of course, when he was in the office, he still had to wear the robes and hat, it just looked so natural on him. He noticed as well that the knife was now strapped to Naruto's side with a belt and it didn't look like it would be leaving anytime soon. Naruto, I'll allow you to wear that knife. After tonight, I think it would be a good idea. You'll be starting at the academy in a week and we'll get your gifts tomorrow. I don't want you to tell anyone what happened here tonight. I don't want you flaunting your skills at the academy. A ninja's best friend is deception. You don't have to hide your skills, but don't boast and don't flaunt them. Naruto nodded and fingered the knife. It made him feel safe. Your duties at the tower are going to be reduced and I'll talk with your uncle about taking you on to learn about knives and how to wield them properly. He's quite the dab hand with them. You'll learn a lot from him. What about Gai-sensei? He'll still help you, but he'll be taking on a team after this semester, so he won't be available to you all the time. Asuma will have his duties as well, so you might be on your own most of the time. Naruto nodded. At least he'd be able to see his friends more. You'll still be helping me at the tower, so don't get too comfortable. The boy groaned playfully and Sarutobi smiled. Perhaps, things would be alright after all. He would need to make it clear about the Kyuubi though. Before I pack you off to bed, Naruto, I want you to go and talk to your mother and brother. They were very frightened. And if the Kyuubi talks to you again, I want you to tell me immediately. Understand? Yes, Gigi. Good. Now go find your mother, I'm sure she's worried sick about you. Naruto nodded again and shut the door behind him. Sarutobi followed him soon after. I'm getting too old for this. Naruto swung the door to his mother's room open and was immediately tackled by 2 sobbing figures. My baby, my poor baby. Why did you have to do that? But mom, he was going to kill you. But you shouldn't have had to kill so young. Naruto sighed and waited for his mother to stop her sobbing. He patted Konohamaru on the head, the little boy clinging to his side, sobbing into his shirt. He was sure Konohamaru had been scared witless when he had emerged from the wall and even more so when he had slit the throat of that ninja. His thoughts were broken when he heard the two begin to calm down and stared at his mother. Are you alright? I think that's something I should be asking you, Mom. I'm fine, Naruto. My throat's a little sore, but alive. How are you? Are you alright? Yeah. Gigi sat me down and talked to me about what I did and told me how I wasn't to blame. I'm fine, Mom. Eri nodded and held him tighter, as if she was trying to smother him. Naruto felt a tug on his sleeve and looked down at Konohamaru. Aniki, what was that you did when you killed that guy? Naruto had to be careful here. He couldn't tell Konohamaru what he'd done, it would be all over the village by tomorrow. The boy was proud of his brother and would tell anyone who would listen. I did something that only I can do, Ototo. Listen to me, you can't tell anyone about what I did, okay? I'll get in trouble if you do. Konohamaru nodded his head and yawned. He was way up past his bedtime. Eri shuffled the two boys to her bed. Come on, we're all sleeping here tonight. But Mom, I'm too old. She sent him a hard look. You're still my baby, Naruto, and I say get in. Besides, I want to be sure that nothing else will happen tonight. For my mind's sake, please. Naruto nodded and got in, placing his knife under his pillow. Konohamaru snuggled up to his mother and Eri put an arm around Naruto. They all drifted into a peaceful sleep, forgetting momentarily about the night's troubles. The next morning found the Sarutobi household carrying on like nothing had happened. All except for 4 members. Sarutobi, Eri, Konohamaru, and Naruto had all sat down over breakfast and gone over everything again to make sure everyone knew that what Naruto did had been for the good of his mother. He had saved her. Naruto still held a reserved right of vindication, but he was also a little sad for the ninja that he had killed. The man hadn't been in his right mind. It didn't excuse trying to kill his mother though. Sarutobi, once all the proceedings were over, told them to get dressed and ready to leave for town. When Naruto asked why, he was given a smile. For your present, of course. You're going to school, right? Naruto nodded, not seeing where his grandfather was going with this. Well, you're old enough to pick out your own clothing now. We'll be buying you a wardrobe for your ninja career. Naruto leapt to his feet and let out a cry of victory. Finally, no more robes or uncomfortable clothes his mother bought for him. You still have to wear the robes at the office. It only dampened his mood slightly. Asuma had met them on their way out the door and had offered to come along, if only to offer advice and make sure Eri didn't doll the boy up. Sarutobi told him quietly what had transpired the night before, making Asuma whistle. He hadn't been that young when he made his first kill. He looked at his newly found nephew with appraising eyes. The boy didn't look like he could kill a fly, and yet, he had unflinchingly killed an enemy when his family was threatened. That was a good thing. He agreed to teach the boy how to handle his knife as well. They entered the clothing shop and Naruto almost went ballistic. Finally, he could dress like a true shinobi. Sarutobi just hoped the boy wouldn't shatter his wallet too bad, they still had to eat lunch after all. And he just knew they'd end up at Ikiraku's. A couple of hours later found Naruto emerging from the shop with a wide smile on his face. His new clothing was secure in a storage scroll he had brought along, and he had impressed Asuma with his skill with it. He didn't want to wear any of the clothing until he attended class so he could thoroughly surprise his friends. The next day saw his knife combat training with Asuma begin. Contrary to his uncle's lazy front, he was a taskmaster when it came to training in things he was interested in. And once he found out that Naruto played Shugi, he demanded a match a day. It was a tiresome habit to fall into. His duties at the tower went on in the evening and he awaited the first day of the academy. In a scroll he had his books ready, a game board for Shugi so he could play Shikamaru at lunch, and his clothes for the first day laid out. The day finally came and Naruto walked to the school slowly, hardly believing that he was going. He knew it was going to be boring, but he was still excited. This was a forum where the children couldn't run away from him, and even if they ignored him, his friends would be there. That thought gave him a small boost. Naruto walked through the doorway of the academy's entrance and touched the frame reverently. This was it, the big moment. He walked down the hall and asked one of the Chunin teachers where Iruka's classroom was. He was pointed in the direction and walked calmly, his feet knocking against the hardwood floor. He took a deep breath when he reached the door and turned the knob slowly. Iruka stood in front of his class, calling the roll as usual, slightly bored as usual, and wishing they would shut the hell up, as usual. As he read further and further down the list, his voice droned more and more until he came to a name familiar to all of Konoha. Uzumaki Naruto. He looked up, scanning the classroom, and saw that the boy wasn't there. When he saw the boy wasn't there, he let out a sigh of relief. He held no animosity against the boy himself, but knew that some of his students' parents did and Mizuki did. He didn't need the drama. Either it was a mistake that his name had ended up on the register or he was late. Iruka wasn't lucky like that though. He heard the door swing open, and heard someone begin to speak. "Excuse me, is this Iruka-sensei's classroom?" He and most of the class gasped when they saw who it was. Hinata clapped her hands happily, Shino smiled behind his collar, Choji grinned and elbowed his sleeping friend, who smirked and muttered, "Troublesome blonde," before going back to sleep, and Kiba let out a whoop of happiness. Sasuke let out a grunt of disapproval and went back to staring out the window. Sakura and Ino eyed him up and down, scrutinizing him. He was quite a sight. Letting him choose his own clothing had been a blessing to Naruto. No more shorts and t-shirts. He stood before them in black cargo pants and black combat boots, his field knife strapped to his right leg. His torso was enclosed in a long-sleeved, camouflaged mesh undershirt and a black t-shirt with a red fox covered it. Shino was happy that he wore the watch he had given him, Hinata was ecstatic he was wearing the pendant she had given him and the plated gloves as well, and Kiba looked disgruntled that he wasn't wearing the collar. Not like he would have worn it anyway. Hinata had developed a nasty little joking streak and she might have brought the leash Kiba had given her. Naruto never thought the two would go in together to humiliate him. He turned to the teacher and smiled. "I'm Uzumaki Naruto." Iruka sighed and rubbed his temples. This year would be total hell. He could already hear the kids whispering. "Thank you Naruto. Take a seat anywhere and we'll begin." Naruto nodded and plodded up the steps to sit beside Hinata and Kiba. Hinata smiled shyly and gave him a hug, which he returned. Kiba leaned over to whisper in his ear. "Glad you came, man. Welcome to the 9th Circle of Hell, otherwise known as the Academy. I'm Kiba and I'll be your guide." Naruto chortled and pulled out a book on ceiling as Iruka geared up for a lecture. At least he wouldn't be too bored sitting beside Kiba. "Now, the first thing we'll learn is about the history of Konoha." Iruka turned to where he heard the sound of a head impacting wood and found Naruto with his head down on his desk, and amused Hinata and Kiba on either side. Naruto groaned and picked his book back up, drowning out Iruka's voice. "Scratch boring, this could prove to be unbearable, let me know what you think. Naruto's in school and the madness begins." Thanks for listening. I hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like for more what ifs and support the author. See you guys in the next video.